This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
A car explosion leaves 19 people dead in Cairo, Egypt. Trump says there's no place for hate in the US, but Democrats criticize his stance on immigrants. And celebrations in Sudan after the military and protest leaders sign a constitutional declaration. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Syrian eateries offer mouth-watering dishes in the heart of Sudan's capital, Khartoum. And in sports, we look at the role of psychology in professional sport. We begin the hour in the United States, where President Donald Trump has said there is no place for hate after the mass shootings in the states of Texas and Ohio. The shootings have triggered another round of debate on America's gun control laws. Toby Muse reports from Washington.
America has been struck with 2 mass shootings in less than 24 hours, the latest toll in its long relationship with firearms. At least one is being treated as domestic terrorism, an attack by a white supremacist. On Sunday, a young man killed 9 people in Dayton, Ohio. Dozens more were injured. The shooter was wearing body armor and used a military-style rifle. Police shot him dead in less than a minute after he opened fire. The police have identified and named the gunman. The shooting took place in a popular bar district. Among the dead are the shooter's sister and her boyfriend. Police say the shooter had little to no adult history with the law, only a few traffic violations.
I ain't gonna never get those sounds out my head of just the gunshots and then the people screaming and the trampling and just the fear, just really seeing fear like that. I've never been in nothing like that where I just seen a group of people so fearful.
The gunman was able to shoot and kill 9 people in a small amount of time because these rifles are so deadly. Even short bursts of fire can kill many.
And I don't mean to scare people, but frankly, I mean, we're at a situation now in our country that you're really, these are so random. There's no place that, you could say, oh, I just don't want to ever go anywhere. So as far as the safety of the district, it's one of the safest places.
These shootings are sure to reopen America's debate about gun regulation. Democrats have called for greater oversight of the sale of these types of rifles, something opposed by most Republicans. U.S. President Donald Trump had this reaction to the mass shooting.
Hate has no place in our country, and we're going to take care of it. But this is also a mental illness problem. If you look at both of these cases, this is mental illness.
The president is expected to address the nation on Monday morning. The El Paso suspect, a 21-year-old man from Allen, Texas, has been charged with capital murder. The district attorney has said that he will seek the death penalty. Authorities say the case is being treated as domestic terrorism and that the suspect is cooperating. The designation of terrorism suggests these killings were carried out with a political motive in mind, and that a 4-page manifesto published online is authentic.
Toby Muse, CGTN, Washington.
A Nigerian court is due to deliver a verdict on the bail application of the leader of a banned Shiite Muslim group to receive medical treatment in Egypt. Ibrahim Zakzaki has been in detention since 2015, this despite a court order in December 2016 to release him. Zakzaki was arrested after a 2015 clash in which the army killed an estimated 350 of his followers at his compound and a nearby mosque and burial ground in northern Kaduna State. At least 20 more of his followers died in clashes with police just last week while holding protests to demand his release. The Nigerian government says the activities of the movement amount to acts of terrorism and illegality. Let's bring you the very latest now on this story. We're joined by our correspondent, Deji Badmus, who is live with us from Lagos, Nigeria. Deji, at this point, has the court issued its verdict?
Absolutely, Lindy. The court has issued a verdict, and of course it's in favor of Ibrahim al-Zakzaki. The court has ruled that he should be released to attend to his health. So he's been granted bail now to proceed for medical treatment in India, because that is exactly what his lawyers actually argued in court. Of course, the prosecution had actually argued against it, that that medical treatment could actually be carried out here in Nigeria, but at the end of the day, the judge sided with Ibrahim al-Zakzaki that he should be released to travel to India for medical treatment. So, and we understand that ruling now takes immediate effect. So the expectation is that he would be released immediately, and then he would have to travel to India for that medical treatment. So it's a positive one for al-Zakzaki.
And what's been the reaction so far, particularly from his followers?
Well, the news is just breaking. Just a couple of minutes ago, the court gave that judgment. But the expectation is that his followers would actually be happy. This is what they had actually been asking for all this while. They had been asking, calling on the authorities now to release him, especially to attend to his health. So I expect that there would be jubilation now among his supporters that he is now going to be released. But obviously, he's not going to stay in the country. He would have to travel to India, I think, immediately to attend to his health. And we expect that now that he's been granted bail and that he's going to be released, that the movement now, I'm talking about his group, would cease all their protests. Because last week, despite the ban now on the movement and the government designating it a terrorist organization, the movement had actually issued a statement that it was going to go ahead. It was going to continue with the protest. But now that they've got a positive verdict, the expectation is that all the protests will cease, and then they would, of course, have to deal with the issue of being designated a terrorist organization, because they're already challenging that in court.
Well, Deji Badmus, thank you so much for that update. Joining us there live from Lagos. And as he says, Ibrahim Zakzaki has been released to attend to his health in India. Now, at least 19 people have died and 32 others injured in an explosion outside Egypt's National Cancer Institute in central Cairo. A car driving against traffic on Cairo's Corniche collided with 3 other cars, causing that explosion late on Sunday. Authorities are still identifying some human remains and looking for possible bodies in the Nile River. Egypt's public prosecutor is investigating the cause of the accident, but there's been no official statement indicating that the explosion was an attack. Now, crowds of jubilant Sudanese have welcomed the agreement on a hard-won constitutional declaration that paves the way for a transition to civilian rule. This, of course, after more than 7 months of demonstrations and violence. CGTN's Chaumgono reports.
Under the agreement, a joint civilian military ruling body will oversee the formation of a civilian government to govern the country for a 3-year transitional period. The deal will also see Rapid Support Forces paramilitaries integrated into the army's chain of command. The declaration follows negotiations between the protest leaders and the generals who ousted President Omar al-Bashir in April. The leaders put the initials on the constitutional declaration. The development was well received as crowds of jubilant Sudanese hailed the long-awaited deal.
Today, we are very happy, and this agreement that has been reached today will have no end. And I am telling our martyrs who died that they did not die, but are living with the revolutions. And we are telling the mothers of the martyrs not to be disappointed. The blood of martyrs will bring blood.
Today is a historic day in Sudan, for it's the beginning of peace and development and security, and that's what we want. Sudan in general needs peace, and now guns must be silenced. We are asking everyone to put down their guns.
Both parties showed satisfaction with the agreement as African Union mediator Mohamed Hassan Libat welcomed this historic milestone.
Both sides negotiate as partners with patriotism, and we are one team that all of us care about Sudan. And this is the winning of national will. There is no winner or loser because the interest of the country is ensured to all by this government.
Your fulfillment of your glorious revolution of civilians and military is the book of true history. The second transitional period is to be and take care, and to respect your defense and security system. Any negligence or any attempt to touch it is a violation of the national presence of Sudan.
Protest leaders say the accord calls for an investigation into protest-related violence, which, according to protest-linked doctors, has left at least 250 people dead since December. It is hoped that the constitutional declaration will pave the way for a parliamentary system with a civilian prime minister, ensuring restoration of peace and stability in Sudan. Chomrono, CGTN.
Well, as Sudan celebrates this landmark of a power-sharing constitutional declaration, CGTN's Adel Al-Mahrawi takes a look at some of the possible challenges the country's transition faces.
Hand in hand, the Freedom and Change Coalition and the military sign a document that will let them rule Sudan together. It's the first of its kind power-sharing agreement since Sudan's independence in 1956. The constitutional declaration begins a 39-month transitional period, which should end with handing over power to an elected civilian authority.
There is no doubt this declaration has ended the political disputes. It has given the opposition powers, who participated in the negotiations, 2/3 of the cabinet formation. It didn't leave the revolutionary powers, who refused to engage in talks with the military away. They have gotten a third. The support to the agreement with the regional countries, the AU and Arab League, indicates that everyone is hopeful.
The document is a great step. It transcends the civilian groups from their opposition phase to a construction phase. Freedom and Change Coalition is no longer an opponent. It has become part of ruling Sudan.
The agreement reflects Sudanese military will to hold all officers responsible for the death of protesters accountable. It sets aside all differences sparked after ousting President Omar al-Bashir, but it's not a solution to all of Sudan's problems.
There are economical challenges which Sudan needs to recover from. Comprehensive peace remains the biggest obstacle. The constitutional declaration has set 3 months to end the remaining war in several parts of Sudan, but the period is not enough to put a political security into that. These are armed groups that must be integrated within the police and the army forces.
This landmark Sudanese agreement sets the guidelines to officially begin a transitional roadmap approved by the concerned parties. Forming a new partnership between civilian powers and the military should make everyone focused on rebuilding the nation.
The agreement doesn't guarantee future division among the civilian coalition powers, as was seen in other Arab nations who have witnessed similar political changes. It also doesn't guarantee that the Sudanese military establishment, which should lead all armed groups in Sudan, will remain intact. Adel Al-Mahrawi, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's bring you more now on this latest development in Sudan. CGTN's Adel Al-Mahrawi joins us live from Cairo. Adel, of course, a celebration on the streets of Khartoum, but talk us through the reaction in the Arab world.
Egypt has welcomed the constitutional declaration agreement and believes it's a step on the right path. So did Saudi Arabia, so did UAE and other countries. The Arab League itself, on behalf of 22 Arab states, has released its own statement welcoming it and believing that this is a path that will, at the end, provide Sudanese people with their aspirations for a new democratic and a new civil power to take rule of the country. there is confidence that this will happen, and it seems that several leaders have been invited to attend the official signing of the document on August 17. It's a big step, after which the names of the Sovereign Council, which has 11 members that will be overlooking the entire transition, will be named. After that was 2 days, candidates, a prime minister will be named. Following that, the members of the cabinet. So the road has started for Sudan's political transition. So far, it appears to be quite a
turbulent journey towards this point. And of course, the constitutional declaration is not the finish line. But how significant is this point then, considering the violence and instability? How significant is this moment for Sudan's neighbors?
One agreement that gives most of the rival powers equal authority within the Sudanese nation. Stability in Sudan will in fact reflect on the stability of borders of its neighboring country. We've seen turbulences in Libya. Egypt has been having fragile border security on its western and northeastern side. It needs a steady southern border with Sudan. There are, of course, regional disputes around Sudan and Eritrea. Ethiopia had some political challenges, but it is and has been one of the biggest supporters it's actually the broker for the agreement it had. So it's just a step, and having a unanimous force that includes civilian and military powers to move forward will definitely affect Sudan's stability and will help it work on the biggest file, as you've seen me mentioning in my report, is that the comprehensive peace is to eliminate all the signs of war and make sure that all armed groups will be packed together under the umbrella of a united military and interior ministry forces. This is crucial for the entire region's stability. Having Sudan going into another turbulence or political disputes is not going to help the already fragile political situation in many African countries.
And indeed, that regional significance for other countries is what we're paying attention to. Let's bring in Girum Chala now into this conversation. Girum, of course, we know that the African Union and the Ethiopian government played key roles in these transition talks. Talk us through what it took to get to this breakthrough point.
Lindy, the contribution of the Ethiopian government and also the continental organization, the African Union, was simply decisive. It was remarkable. Remember, since President Omar Hassan al-Bashir, former president of Sudan, left power, the power vacuum that was created in the country, triggered many to think of perhaps a power competition between the military and the civilian parties, and also perhaps a civil war in the country, or even civil disobedience because of the situation in the country. Now, the intervention by the African Union and the Ethiopian government avoided all those fears that perhaps we have seen in other parts of the countries of this region itself. And at the same time, Ethiopia and the African Union worked together under actually the umbrella of IGAD itself to bring all parties together in Sudan. Remember, there was a fear also that these parties were not willing to speak to one another under the round table discussion to find out a solution for this chaotic situation in the Sudan. So their critical achievement is to bring everyone together, and at the end of the day, what we have seen, the joyous moment of striking a deal that is going to allow Sudan to have a peaceful transition from what it is at the moment to a democratic one, and a reason that gave everyone excitement, Lindy. So it was an important intervention by both Ethiopia and the African Union.
And of course, resulting in this critical achievement. But we know, of course, this is not the finish line. This is not the end of the road. What do you see then as the role of the AU and the Ethiopian mediators going forward for the rest of Sudan's transition journey?
So by all measurements, Sudanese or all sides involved have reasons to celebrate. This is indeed a joyous moment. But remember, as you also said, this is not the end of the journey. It is actually the beginning of what is going to be a fruitful engagement between all parties involved in this process, and also an engagement that is going to build a robust Sudan in the future, one that is going to be democratic and one that is going to also deliver back to its people who are on the streets demanding democracy, human rights and whatnot. So the African Union mediator team led by the advisor of the chairperson Mohamed Labat, or the special envoy of the Ethiopian Prime Minister Mohamed Dirir himself, have been saying again and again, and I had a chance to speak to the Ethiopian envoy there, Mohamed Dirir, Ambassador Mohamed Dirir, who is a very esteemed diplomat himself, very experienced himself. He was telling me that, well, now we have started the real deal. What he's saying by that is that the Sudanese parties need to be supported at this moment. If and only they can deliver the promises made on the paper, they have served not only Sudan but also the region and the continent at the same time. So they are engaged fully. They want to work with them together until even the end of the whole process of years to come as well. Because remember, neighboring countries and also the African Union should be involved deeply to commit people who have signed this deal so that they can deliver until the end, so that Sudan can stand on its own 2 feet, so that other interventions are not necessary. But at this time, we can be confidently speaking that all parties, including the African Union, IGAD, Ethiopia, all neighboring states are behind Sudan's journey to peace, elections, and the formation of course, that transitional kind of government in Sudan, which includes the military and the civilian administration. So the critical road has started. Everyone is on board, and we have to hope that the future is brighter for the country.
Indeed, a moment of hope that seems to be resonating throughout the region. Thank you so much. That's Girum Chala joining us there from Addis Ababa. And thank you to Adel Al-Makhraoui, live with us from Cairo. Now let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, India revokes Kashmir's special status. And 40 migrants arrive in Malta after Germany's intervention.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Indian government has revoked laws that gave special constitutional status to Jammu and Kashmir. Home Minister Amit Shah says they'll become 2 union territories, one with a legislature and one without. Now, this comes as the region sees a heavy security clampdown where local political leaders have been put under house arrest and mobile, internet and phone services suspended. A group of 40 migrants rescued by a German charity ship have arrived in Malta. A deal negotiated by Germany will see to it that the migrants are taken care of by other European Union member states. The 40 were initially rescued off the Libyan coast and sailed to southern Italy. However, the ship they were on was banned from waters. Malta's Prime Minister... Now, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has discussed ways of boosting Egyptian-British bilateral ties with the new British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. Both leaders hope to strengthen ties between the two countries in the economic, political, security and tourism fields. Let's get to more on this. We're now joined once again by CGTN's Adel Al-Makhraoui, live with us from Cairo. Adel, how significant is it for the new UK Prime Minister to reach out to Egypt so early since he's taken up the role of Prime Minister?
It is quite evidential on how keen Boris Johnson is to start opening a new page with Egypt in general. The British-Egyptian ties have been for long considered sort of a partnership. However, in recent years there have been quite some criticism and issues of political remarks from British ambassadors in Egypt. So having Boris Johnson taking the initiative to give a call to the Egyptian president was in itself an evidential step that there is and there might be a change coming soon to these bilateral relations. Boris Johnson is a different character from Theresa May and also predecessors in that position. He's sort of alike in his political views, and he has shown quite an admiration to the Egyptian president in some of the crucial files that the Middle East is facing. The two are planning to meet actually face-to-face next month on the sidelines of the G7 meeting, which Egypt will be participating as a guest nation.
And on the other hand, what is Egypt's interest in keeping relations warm with London?
Well, London is one of the biggest international powers in general, and it has a lot of interest in the Middle East, specifically around the Libyan file itself. Because of the petroleum investments there and in the rest of the region, it makes London a very vital partner for Cairo to maintain good relations with. There are mutual interests in terms, not just economically, but also in terms of preserving security in the Middle East, and there are several files that Cairo sees Britain in general as a key ally in. And opening this new sort of communication between the two nations will definitely help them bolster ties and look for more investment opportunities for British companies in Egypt.
Adel Al-Makhri, thank you so much for that. Joining us live from Cairo. Now, staying in Egypt, the gold-plated coffin of Egypt's youngest king, Tutankhamun, has been revealed for the first time. Egypt says it started its first ever 8-month restoration of the sarcophagus since it was discovered back in 1922. Let's take a look.
The sarcophagus and the treasured collection of Tutankhamun's tomb are expected to be the centerpieces of the new Grand Egyptian Museum. Antiquities officials reveal the coffin at the museum's conservation center.
The state of conservation of the coffin is very fragile because it was never restored since the discovery. We made first aid intervention. Then we moved the coffin to the museum. It was kept in the isolation hall during 7 days. Then the fumigation started a few days ago for 3 weeks. We expect 8 months of preservation and restoration.
The state sarcophagus is part of 3 coffins that were found in the Valley of the Kings in Luxor. British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the tomb of the 18th dynasty king in 1922.
More than 5,000 pieces of Tutankhamun's collection will be exhibited for the first time in one place. Here, we can see for the first time 6 military chariots belonging to King Tutankhamun. Before, some were on display at the Egyptian Museum, some at Luxor Museum, and some in the Military Museum.
The Grand Egyptian Museum will officially open by the end of 2020 near the pyramids of Giza. The structure has been under construction for about 15 years. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Chirping of birds, sounds of whispering trees, burbling of streams. When sunlight sets the forest's leaves aglow and waterfall surges down from the mountain, we see and hear the Earth's wondrous beauty. The Earth is meant to be appreciated, and the life of its inhabitants deserves our endless exploration. Come with CGTN to listen and see, in chorus of life, to marvel at nature and life.
You're watching Africa Live. Your business news is still ahead. Coming up, Syrian eateries offer mouth-watering dishes in the heart of Sudan's capital, Khartoum. And South Korea to cut its reliance on Japanese imports by investing $6.5 billion in research and development.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Syrian migrants in Sudan have found a niche for themselves in the restaurant business. In the capital, Khartoum, Syrian eateries are popular among Sudanese customers looking for a little variety. CGTN's Daniela Pearson has more.
Malik Abdul Wahab, from the city of Aleppo in Syria, came to Sudan shortly after the war began back home. His restaurant, Ayam el-Sham, or Days of the Levant, is one of many that line an upscale neighborhood in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum.
Before in Sudan, there was no very well-known food. They are known for beans, falafel and other things. But we came and added crispy Mexican recipes, chicken roasting machines, pizza among others, and a shawarma, and we thank God for the quality we have.
Khartoum residents now flock to restaurants serving Syrian delicacies. Locals say that it's often hard to find a table at restaurants in the Kafuri district. It's also led to fierce competition between the restaurants themselves.
The place is clean and attractive, and the food you find here is different and varied. Also, what makes Syrian food different is their welcome. It gives a special taste for food. This is what interests me in Syrian restaurants, and they are also very serious about cooking. It makes you feel the taste you see in films.
Syrian food is always different in taste and in quality. We as Arabs from an Islamic culture like to come to the Syrian restaurant because it has a different taste and a different quality from our Sudanese brothers. And we tell them, you're highly welcome to Sudan.
Syrians are granted visa-free entry into Sudan. Since 2011, more than 20,000 have arrived, fleeing the conflict that erupted after a bloody crackdown on anti-government protests. Those that settled here enjoy the same rights as nationals, including access to healthcare and education.
Since the beginning of the Syrian civil war, we came to this country and we were warmly welcomed by our Sudanese brothers. They received us with hospitality, and now we don't feel like total strangers because of the hospitality they have shared with us. When you are in a foreign country, the people are good to you when you have good relations with them.
Sudanese society has welcomed the Levantine influences brought over by the Syrian migrants. Wahab's Restaurants has flourished since its inception and now has over 15 people on staff, most of them from Syria. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Protesters in Hong Kong have launched a city-wide strike, disrupting air, road and rail transport. More than 2,300 aviation workers reportedly took sick leave, causing the cancellation of more than 200 flights. Subway services were suspended in the morning but resumed later in the afternoon. There were also multiple blockades that closed down major roads. Some protesters even attacked police stations. Hong Kong authorities have condemned the latest violence and the use of separatist slogans.
Recently, what they said, the glorious restoration of Hong Kong and the revolution of our time, are a challenge to one country, two systems and national sovereignty. What they're doing is to overturn Hong Kong, to ruin life for 7 million people.
I appeal to all the people to stick to their positions. Any strike will do no good to Hong Kong, to residents' daily lives, or our city's economic activities. I hope we can all calm down.
The GDP growth in the second quarter is 0.6%. It seems similar to the figure of the first quarter. But think about it, if we consider seasonal adjustment, the real growth is actually minus 0.3%. Our economic growth has lost momentum, and technically speaking, if that negative trend continues, the third quarter will face a downturn.
HSBC announced the shocking departure of the Chief Executive Officer John Flint after just 18 months in office, saying the bank needed a change at the top in this challenging environment. The Chief Executive's exit is a result of differences over the execution of the business strategy. His departure comes as the biggest bank in Europe is dealing with the escalation of a trade war between China and the United States, an uneasy monetary policy cycle, the unrest in the key Hong Kong market, and the hesitancy of Brexit. Flint ran HSBC's retail and wealth management business before taking over as CEO in February 2018. Now, South Korea on Monday announced plans to invest 7.8 trillion won, about $6.48 billion in research and development for local materials, parts and equipment over the next 7 years, all in an effort to cut the reliance on Japanese imports.
We will also intensely support to secure the supply of 100 key strategic materials early on. Also, we will strongly push for diversification of importing countries regarding the key strategic materials.
Now, smartphone makers around the world are embracing the new generation of communication by launching 5G mobile devices. Many in and outside the industry view Chinese tech giant Huawei as a global leader in the field. But what lies within many of its products and devices is often forgotten. Our reporter Omar paid a visit to one of Huawei's tech labs in South China to get a closer look at some of the core technologies the company has developed.
With the unveiling of the Mate 20X smartphone, Huawei is ushering in the 5G era. But behind the glamour of the final product, and perhaps out of the spotlight, lies years of research and development.
Since the year 2009, Huawei already invests around $4 billion in the 5G basic technology development, standard development, and also the equipment development.
The Shenzhen-based firm has over 80,000 people working in R&D, accounting for nearly 50% of its workforce. And at one of Huawei's many labs in South China, a range of experiments and tests are being carried out to fuel the 5G rollout. Here at Huawei's Advanced Thermal Laboratory, scientists are exploring the latest in heat dissipation technology for 5G base stations. And it's exactly these units that will eventually power 5G networks and coverage. There's also this structure material lab, which was established back in 2012. Since then, engineers have studied the impact of harsh weather conditions and diverse environments on 5G equipment. Scientists say the units will have to be able to withstand corrosive substances, fluctuating temperatures, and water.
So we've got coating technologies to avoid snow or water accumulation on the surface of antenna cover to make sure that the covered snow won't prohibit signal transmission.
These base stations will eventually be placed outdoors in various exposed areas. Engineers are using in-house developed technology known as active cooling and two-phase cooling to ensure that networks powered by these base stations can handle any climate.
For 5G, the heat is also another problem. So the heat generated by 5G chips is far more than the 4G chips. So here we also have material technology for heat dissipation.
Given Huawei's unique positioning within the 5G industry, it should come as no surprise that the company wants to deliver a product that so many people are eager to experience. From a business standpoint, Their determination in R&D is translating into commercial success.
Until now, Huawei already signed more than 50 commercial contracts, 5G contracts, with the global leading operator. And also we already shipped more than 150,000 pieces of base stations. We are deploying and the operator are commercializing the 5G network right now.
With 5G-enabled phones set to be in consumers' hands in just a few weeks, what lies underneath the cover may well be an afterthought. But for Huawei and their efforts, that's a reality they'll gladly take. Omar Khan, CGTN, Dongguan, Guangdong Province.
The streets of London are marked by a new feature lately, electric black cabs. The manufacturer, London Electric Vehicle Company, is a subsidiary of the Chinese car manufacturer Geely. The company claims it's grabbed a 10% share of the market in the UK capital since launching the cars 18 months ago. CGTN's Richard Bestick reports from London.
Pollution across London, although often invisible to the naked eye, is expensive, damage running into the billions of dollars, according to political leaders in the capital. Over 2 million people subjected to illegal levels of toxic air. The health impact in crisis, according to City Hall.
So no more polluting taxis, no more polluting vehicles. It really reduced the pollution in London and reduced the health impacts that Londoners are facing.
With 13 million passengers on board so far and 21 million miles on the clock, London's new electric cab is already playing its part in cutting pollution levels, according to the manufacturer's LEVC, a subsidiary of the Chinese car-making giant Geely.
No date yet for when the company will go into profit with its electric cab, so the business model is still clearly bedding in.
LEVC has plans to replicate the electric cab's London success across Europe and as far away as Hong Kong. However, the company is highly dependent on the just-in-time delivery of component parts in the manufacturing process. The boss at the company keeping a wary eye on the rising threat of a no-deal Brexit, creating parts shortages.
The things that really would hurt us a lot, but not only us, the whole country, is a no-deal Brexit. Without a deal, really, I mean, we will get in trouble. We can predict already that after a certain time we would have to close our factory because we will run out of parts after a while for sure.
Export potential could also suffer from a possible crash in the value of the pound and new EU tariffs should there be a no-deal Brexit. Britain's Society of Motor Manufacturers says investment in the wider industry has fallen by more than 70% in the last 6 months over fears of a no-deal Brexit. For now, though, London cabbies say the new electric taxi has brought a positive shine to their pay packets, saving them an average of $125 a week in fuel compared to the old diesel cabs. Richard Bestick, CGTN, London.
Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the programme. Coming up, South African vets test at least 50 elephants for a human strain of tuberculosis.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start in South Africa, where 3 years after a rare discovery of the human strain of tuberculosis in a deceased elephant, researchers are still trying to find answers. The Kruger National Park's wildlife vets formally registered a project at the end of last year to conduct tests on around 50 Kruger Park elephants in a preliminary study. CGTN's Renia Delcam reports.
In 2016, a post-mortem examination of an elephant found dead in the Kruger National Park shocked researchers. They found that it had died from a severe case of human tuberculosis.
That was a very unique finding in a free-ranging elephant, the first time in Africa that's been found, although it has been found in Asian elephants and in elephants in zoos. So our concern is whether this was just a very rare occurrence or whether it's something that's really a problem that we haven't identified before.
The disease surveillance of the Kruger's elephant population includes tranquilizing individual elephants, then running diagnostic tests on them.
We actually have to immobilize animals to get the samples, which include getting blood samples, and we perform a tracheobronchial lavage, which means we're actually washing some of the respiratory secretions out of the parts of the lung and trying to recover bacteria if they're present.
This bull elephant was tranquilized with opioids said to be 10,000 times as potent as morphine, and it had to be closely monitored.
With this animal, the important part of it is the breathing and the pulse. That's where I play a role. And I also record all the data from the start time up until the animal wakes up. So in between that, when we do samples, I need to be monitoring the animal so that if anything happens, we can wake it up immediately or we continue working with it safely.
At this stage, the prevalence of human TB in wild African elephants is still extremely low, with just a single case detected in the around 35 animals.
We're targeting primarily older bulls, which seem to be more susceptible, and therefore, if it's present, we're hoping to pick it up. The research doesn't happen overnight, so we're continuing to work constantly with developing new tests that may be more sensitive. And at this point, we've also got blood tests that suggest that it might be present at very low levels here in the park.
And they say they won't give up, not until they learn just how the killer disease, TB, could impact the elephant population here in the Kruger. Renee Dalcom, CGTN, Kruger National Park, South Africa.
Well, here in Kenya, poaching may be declining in the country's Masai Mara, but human-elephant conflict remains a significant issue in the area. Steps, though, are being taken to create peace between the animals and local communities. Amy McConaughey has more.
We are in the Masai Mara Reserve in Kenya, home to the African elephant. Most people know the threat posed by poachers who hunt these elephants for their tusks. But another, more pervasive risk is the growing tension between elephants and the local communities. To learn more about this, we met with Wilson at the Mara Elephant Project.
We have been able to reduce this poaching in the Mara. But the human-elephant conflict is a day-to-day activity. For the human-elephant conflict is the elephants coming out of the reserve and coming out of the conservancy, going to your farm. So this is now the big challenge now, is how we can reduce this human-elephant conflict.
It's currently crop ripening season and elephants are tempted to head over to the farms and get their share of maize. But this causes huge destruction to the local livelihoods of farmers, and elephants often pay a serious price.
These are some of the arrows we remove from one elephant. So when elephants go to the farms, the local community will try to push or to chase the elephants out of their farm. So what they will use is these arrows.
But these guys have come up with some creative tools to keep elephants safe and away from the local communities.
This is just a mixture of chili powder and the firecracker inside. So and this is where they light a firecracker.
Okay.
And once you light it, and then you throw to the elephants.
We're on our way to meet some rangers in the field who have been dealing with quite a few human-wildlife conflict issues lately. So we're going to see what work they've been doing. David is one of the rangers. He has been working at the Mara Elephant Project for 8 years.
Watu wanapanda mahindi, wanapanda mimea tofauti, ndio huwa wanakula. Sisi tunakanga tayari kila saa wote kuchunga hiyo ndovu. Pia tuna patrol kila asubuhi kwenda kuangalia hiyo ndovu venye wako, kama wanakula mzuri, kama kuna wale
project, and there's around 6 rangers here who live here, sleep here day and night for 2 months before being transferred somewhere else, and they're here to respond to any calls on human-elephant conflict in the area. What helps these rangers in their daily patrols is the collaring of elephants. These collars show the real-time whereabouts of elephants, and if they go too close to fences, the rangers are able to step into action. Behind us is Fred. He's one of MEP's collared elephants, and you can see the collar hanging around his neck. He's the only one in his herd who's collared, but the collar allows Wilson and other MEP members to track his whereabouts, and through this they're able to mitigate human-elephant conflict. And these tactics appear to be working. For Fred and the other Mara elephants, alongside local communities, there remains hope for a peaceful coexistence.
Well, let's take a short break. Still ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, we look at the role of psychology in professional sport.